So Justin, people are saying Ethereum has a problem. Liquidity, UX, wallets, chains, all of our infrastructure is fragmented. While one of the beautiful things about the rollup centric roadmap for Ethereum is that we all get to innovate and experiment in different directions, these different directions are, of course, different from each other. One of the costs is that this breaks the universal composability that we used to enjoy on the Ethereum layer 1. It is getting harder to use Ethereum holistically today more than ever. This is the current state of things. Is this where we end up? Is this the future of Ethereum? What say you about this current context about Ethereum's trajectory?
Well, first of all, I do want to acknowledge that we do have a problem with fragmentation. And as you said, it boils down to a very large extent around this idea of composability. Each layer 2 is kind of its own little silo right now. And while we do have bridges, those are asynchronous, they're slow, and they're somewhat brittle and very difficult to use. Now, the good news is that a lot of people have been thinking about how to fix this, and I think we can fundamentally fix it with something called shared sequencing. So the root cause for this fragmentation of composability originates from the fact that we have different entities called sequencers that are ordering transactions for little clusters of execution. So we have the Arbitrum cluster, the Base cluster, the Optimism cluster. Now, it turns out that shared sequencing in and of itself is not sufficient, but it's a necessary step to try and regain this universal composability. And when I say universal composability, I specifically mean universal synchronous composability. So synchronous means that kind of things happen at the same time, things happen atomically. It's as if you have contracts called arbitrary other contracts in other execution domains. So one of the big upsides of having this universal synchronous composability, as you mentioned, is that we get things like unified liquidity, as opposed to the status quo where we have these fragmented pools of liquidity. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. We get so much more with universal shared composability.
Okay, Justin. So you kind of we're setting up the problem a little bit, and we're going to talk about kind of the solution, the holy grail, which is this term that you've been using called universal composability, and that for the normie crypto user is a mouthful. Universal composability. What the heck does that mean? Let's just try to break this down into kind of layman's terms when we're talking about the problem of fragmentation today. Let's call it. So, in a lot of ways, Ethereum is like much easier to use than it has been, but in some ways, it's like more difficult. When you tell someone who's new to crypto, yeah, just use the Ethereum network. Like they might be like, oh, I see that one. Is that the one with really expensive fees? I'm not using that. And then you say, no, you can go use Optimism, Arbitrum, ZK Sync, Polygon, like on down, right? And they're like, well, which one should I choose? How do I get started? I remember in the early days of Bankless, when we were talking to someone about getting on chain for the first time, the answer was pretty easy. Like you had kind of one option. You just go to Ethereum. There's no other network selections inside of MetaMask. You can kind of live there. You don't have to worry about bridging assets. The only bridge you had to make was going from a centralized exchange like a Kraken or a Coinbase on chain, on Ethereum. And that was it. You could kind of live there. Now, the L2 roadmap has essentially asked Ethereum users, including the newcomers, to go pick a layer 2. And that's caused some confusion because what if the app that I want to use isn't on the specific layer 2 that I'm on? And I don't want to use Ethereum mainnet because it's too expensive, but like what chain do I use? And the UX around this, the liquidity around this, it's difficult. So what's happening is, I think we've seen this a lot in the second half of 2023, is competitors, Ethereum competitors, let's call them, or alternative layer 1s, are seeing this soft underbelly of Ethereum. And they're basically saying, look, come to this monolithic chain. We got it all here. You just go on chain and everything is universally composable. So an app from like one place in an alternative layer 1, like a Solana, let's say, or an Avalanche, it's available to anyone who is on that chain. So That's kind of what we're talking about, just to set up the fragmentation problem, is the UX and liquidity issues that exist today in Ethereum in its current form. And I think you're acknowledging that. I'm just like wondering, high level, as we get into the rest of the episode, was the move to the layer 2 roadmap, is it worth this cost? Because we're feeling some pain right now. And I just want to acknowledge that and talk about that.
Right. So I'd say that the move to layer 2s was absolutely necessary. And the reason is that otherwise we move too slowly. Like the layer 1 is extremely slow to move forward. It's extremely ossified in some sense. And we have these extremely high standards of quality to ship things at layer 1. So we could have rollups at layer 1. Actually, those are called native rollups. But in order to do so, we would have, for example, to have a zkVMs, but not just one zkVM, but multiple redundant implementations of a zkVM that are redundant, that are battle tested over years. And this is just something that we don't have right now. And so in some sense, like this Ethereum accelerationism in the short and medium term comes from these layer 2s that permissionlessly can deploy things and move Ethereum forward, while the layer 1 gathers what it needs to ship. The good news is that a lot of this fragmentation, as I said, is temporary. And I think there's kind of two fundamental reasons. One of them is that a lot of the details around fragmentation can be abstracted away, right? Like when you use the internet, there's a lot of different brands behind it. There's a lot of different things. But at the end of the day, you can wrap everything up and like just present a very simple, shiny user interface to the user that abstracts away a lot of technical details. And then there's something else, which is something much more fundamental, which cannot be like papered away and abstracted away, which is the difference between asynchronous composability and synchronous composability. That's like a key differentiator. And what synchronous composability means is that if I'm a smart contract, I can go call any other smart contract and things will happen atomically. So if I'm building a very complex application, let's say that I'm building a marketplace. A marketplace needs identity. It needs a reputation system. It needs payments and escrow agents, and it needs insurance providers. Now, if all of these money Legos are on execution zones with different sequences, then now suddenly your application becomes extremely brittle, because every time you want to interact with it, you're interacting with different counterparties, and composability starts to break down in a very meaningful way. Whereas if we have this one shared sequencer which unifies everything, then it's this one entrance door to this very complex world, which can be extremely rich and diverse, but it's a real unlock to go from asynchronous composability to synchronous composability. Now, I used to, be one of those people who would say asynchronous composability is fine. And part of the reason is that Ethereum previously had this roadmap with sharding where we had 64 or 1024 shards, which were asynchronous. And to be fair, in hindsight, it was kind of cope. I was optimistic that we could paper over with abstraction.
Wait, Justin. So researchers get cope too? Because I know crypto investors get cope. I had no idea that researchers actually get technical cope.
Well, we have various constraints, and then, we just do the best that we can with, the laws of crypto economics. Dank sharding was a massive unlock, right? Because dank sharding basically says that we can do synchronous data availability. We don't have to break data availability down into these asynchronous shards. And not only can we do synchronous data availability, we can do synchronous composability, and we can do this synchronous sequencing. So we can do everything synchronously. And in some sense, we're getting the best of both the modular thesis and the monolithic thesis, right? We're getting all the efficiency and the user experience of the monolithic thesis, but behind the scene, we have all the richness and diversity and decentralization of the modular thesis.
To continue leveling up your crypto game, then you need to get on the Bankless newsletter. It's the world's most popular crypto email and is completely free. Just click below to sign up.